Hello, everybody. Welcome to Post-Crisis Hospitality Management Certificate Program, Week 6, put together by the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management in the Muma College of Business at the University of South Florida. My name is Dr. Cihan Çobanoğlu. I am the director of M3 Center, also the McKibben Endowed Chair Professor at the University of South Florida. As usual, week 6 is going to start again with a pre-show interview. Today, the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management Dean, Pat Morio, will host Mr. Don Fox, the CEO of Firehouse Subs, a company with 1,190 stores. So before I invite Dr. Pat to introduce Mr. Don Fox, I would like to show you a quick video about the Firehouse Subs company.
It's the sub that started the fire. I'm not a singer, but bad start. But let's not focus on that. Hi, I'm Sean. A title for myself? Guy who loves sandwiches and also owns a camera. Great accolades. Put it on a business card. My parents have to be super thrilled with the way my career has gone. Some may say, what career? Let's get back on track. Are you hungry? Probably, definitely you're watching a Firehouse Subs video. So. Hey, but I don't really blame you. If only it were edible, right? The video, not the sandwich is edible. Well, if you weren't already starving, in 5 seconds you will be. Roll it.
Order for Sean?
Oh, I'm sorry. You guys haven't been properly introduced. Hook and ladder, this is viewer. Viewer, this is hook and ladder. And if you guys are anything like me, you like your sandwiches just like you like your fire trucks. And since this sandwich right here was named after a specific type of fire truck, this will be pretty seamless. They're both impressively long, can quickly get a little toasty, require someone in the driver's seat, appealing to the eye, bright and flashy, loaded with impressive equipment, stacked high. Sometimes you need a coworker to help with the second half, loved by Dalmatians everywhere, and they're both out to rescue you. The fire engine saving the structure of your home and the hook and ladder saving the structure of your stomach when you're hungry. It sounded better in my head. Who hired this guy? Was this all a stretch? Maybe. Yes. What comparisons can you think of between a hook and ladder and the sandwich hook and ladder? Go ahead and post in the comments below. Simply because you're smarter than I am and you'll be a lot more creative. And you'll be able to go the rest of your day thinking, at least I'm smarter than that guy.
Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen.
Dr. Pat.
Wow, that was great. Thank you, Cihan. And I want to welcome Don Fox to our post-crisis program, the pre-game interview. Don is the CEO and Chief Operating Officer of Firehouse Subs. He's been with them for several years, since 2003. He's with Burger King for 23 years in an earlier part of his life. He was also named the Nation's Restaurant News Operator of the Year in 2013. That's really a big deal. Nation's Restaurant News is a huge newspaper, and they don't do that easily. He was the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association Chair for 2017, and I think I saw you live, Don, when you did our annual luncheon here in Sarasota. Mm-hmm. And he is on the National Restaurant Association Board of Governors, which is also a big deal. But the biggest deal is for us in the Muma College of Business, he was the star of CEO Interview by the Muma College of Business in 2018. So those are all the accolades for Don. So welcome, Don. And I of course, I had a chance to listen to some of the podcasts that were done with you by some of the various outlets. I hope I can live up to their excellent standards today.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will, Pat. I'm confident.
So. Well, my first question to you is, can you tell us just a little bit about the backstory of Firehouse? How did it get started? I know it's owned by a couple of the guys who did start it in the family, but maybe tell us a little bit. Over 1,100. I think you said 1,160, Cihan.
Sure, it's one of those overnight success stories that took 26 years to happen. But it started just with a single restaurant in Jacksonville, Florida, where I'm speaking to you from today. and two firefighter brothers, Robin Sorensen and Chris Sorensen, aspiring entrepreneurs. They tried a couple things before that, didn't work out quite as well, but they rolled the dice on that little sub shop, only about 1,200 square feet, the very first one in Mandarin area of Jacksonville. The older brother, Chris, he stayed on the fire department for a few years, working full time. A typical firefighter schedule is 24 hours on, 48 off. I think after a while they thought about it the other way around. It was 24 off by comparison to the firefighter in the fire station and 48 hard hours in the restaurant. The younger brother, Robin, went full time, open to close every day, running the restaurant. And it didn't start out with an aspiration of being a brand of over 1,000 restaurants, but they began to develop units fairly quickly. Had a little misstep in franchising very early on. They really had no business getting into franchising within the first year of operating, but they got swept up with the idea when people came in and inquired about investing, and ran out, got what at the time was called a Uniform Franchise Offering Circular. Now it's called the Franchise Disclosure Document. Back then it was the UFOC. Met the legal requirements, got it done, sold some franchise deals, quickly realized they really didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have infrastructure, support, marketing material, none of the things normally associated with adding value to a franchise. So they shifted gears, put their emphasis by being very frugal, and frugality is a cornerstone of their success, especially in those early years. They managed to buy back those franchise units, kept developing company-owned units themselves, and that got them to a point around 2000, 2001, when they decided to get back into franchising in a good way. Much more planned, deliberate, got some great outside consultation. A gentleman by the name of Michael Seid, who's to this day one of the top franchising gurus, his company MSA Associates, and Michael brought in a team of consultants that helped them formulate the go-forward strategy. And we've been operating under the basic tenets of that since. Always in a very deliberate way. We made sure never to go too far too fast. Developed in a contiguous method geographically, expanding across the country so that we kept brand awareness at an optimum level, kept supply chain together, reaching out too far, adding exorbitant costs that franchisees perhaps couldn't bear the burden of. And before you know it, you're at 1,190 restaurants. And of course, as we'll talk about, unprecedented times today. It's unbelievable what we've been going through for the past 9 months. For us, fortunately, that has been a great story of success during the next 9 months. So I guess I want to preface some of that conversation to come, which my sympathy goes out to so many people in the industry that are not, for a variety of reasons, not enjoying that. So I will share at least the things that have worked for us and really brought about record-setting results for our brand.
Well, that's great, Don. I must say that, and I assume this is emblematic of the culture of Firehouse throughout the nation, and I guess you're in Canada as well, from what I see. Because I remember the first one I ever went into. I lived for many years in Las Vegas, taught at UNLV. Mm-hmm. It's the competitor audience, it's okay. And I lived in a suburb called Henderson. And the first one I went to was right on Eastern Avenue. Yeah. And I walked in, I was in a hurry, and I have a problem with my weight, so I try not to eat a lot of carbs. I said, I'm going to get one of these subs today. Walked in, these guys accosted me with welcoming me into the restaurant. I thought, wow, what a great idea this is. So that's my first memory of Firehouse.
I've been to that restaurant many times. That was our first restaurant in that market. It was opened by Mark and Jennifer Cowan, which were our area representatives. So a lot of our development over the years is done on a two-tier franchising model. So the first franchisee in the DMA, designated market area, television market, right, is the area rep. And they open up a training restaurant, which is the one on Eastern Avenue, was their training restaurant. And then they provide support and service on our behalf to the subsequent franchisees who enter the market. So our area rep territories that they manage vary in size. Our largest is over 180 restaurants, smallest around 15. So quite a bit different business model in those cases. But tapping into that power of entrepreneurship, for that representation did some wonderful things in terms of accelerating our growth and getting us to where we are.
It was an amazing thing. I really felt so good and so welcome. And that isn't a huge shop either. It's fairly small.
Fairly modest. One thing you mentioned, you already used the term culture, and what's so great to hear about experiences like you had is as you build out a brand like this, it sounds a bit cliche-ish, but maintaining and even improving upon the culture is the most important thing.
Yeah.
You can talk about so many of the technical things about building a brand or an organization. Hey, in the end, it comes down to people. It takes three resources. It takes capital, takes time, and it takes people. And the people part is by far the most difficult one with which to realize success, and that's about the cultural element. And so your experience all those years ago, that's just what we're shooting for, and we want to have that same type of customer service experience in every location around the country. And it takes people to deliver that.
Absolutely. Well, let's fast forward now to 2020.
Yeah.
And let's go back to March, Don.
Yeah.
And you did allude a moment ago on how different restaurants are positioned in different ways. And of course, in reading the background on both you and on the company, you already had a pretty vibrant pickup and takeout business, which probably helped a little bit. But would you walk us through what those initial days of the pandemic were like in March? Now, I know that seems like a decade ago.
Right.
And obviously, things have changed a lot since then. And so how has the situation, where'd you start in March, and how has it evolved over the last 9 months?
Yeah, these dates are just emblazoned. March 11th was the date that President Trump spoke to the nation that evening and announced not the national emergency per se. That happened on Friday, but it was the first time really addressing on a broad basis the pandemic. The week before that, our business week runs Monday through Sunday, and that Monday, just 2 days before the president's announcement, I'm looking over the sales results for the week, and we had one of the best weeks that we had seen for our brand in about 3 years. Great. And of course, we're expecting that momentum to continue. And the president comes on Wednesday night, and afterwards, I'm thinking, wow, well, we're going to feel this to some extent. We'll see some impact in our restaurants. We were running about, coming off that week, we had been about, plus 3 or 4% comp. And I figured, well, we'll see a swing here. Maybe as long as we're low single digit negative, that'll be okay. And it's so rare, by the way, especially for a broad system, to ever have that kind of a shift in momentum for any reason. For any brand to experience that, it takes usually some type of tragic event that can cause a swing of that magnitude. So remember that Thursday we were negative 6%. So again, that in and of itself was unprecedented, to go from +4 to, for 1,100 restaurants, -6. Well, then the next day, you're already wondering, well, what's going to happen on Friday? And Friday's results come in. We get them Saturday morning. We were down like 10%, but it was Friday night that there was the official declaration of the pandemic. I think by WHO put it out. And Saturday we went down 22%. Sunday down 25%. And at that point, we were getting word from some states. I think, as I recall, maybe 3 different states. One, if I remember, was Indiana. They were going to shut down in-restaurant dining. And a lot of this was in conjunction with the very early guidance from the CDC. The first time we were hearing words like social distancing and things that now are just baked into our vocabulary. Really, the first time we're hearing those things. And well, I'm listening to those announcements. I know there's a couple states that are going to shut down dining rooms, and it just seemed to me that the best thing to do, given all of the uncertainty at that moment in time, was to adhere to the spirit of everything that the CDC was declaring and to go ahead and shut down our dining rooms. Now, prior to the pandemic, about 37% of our business was in the dining room. So about 2/3 in various forms of off-premise business. And that had been shifting a lot, by the way, over a number of years. Our dine-in business back in about 2013 was over half of our sales, about 53%. And it was on a steady and even steady, but it was the last couple of years, increasing rate of decline as people shifted and changed behavior and moving from dining room to off-premise. In fact, I used to, for the last couple of years prior to the pandemic, this was a key issue for us, which is why we changed our packaging and we were working on our online ordering, and we had a number of things in the works prior to the pandemic. And I used to say, feeling that I was speaking facetiously, I would say to our franchisees, as I talked about the decline in dining business, I more than once I said, hey, it's not like it's going to go to zero. Well, on Monday, the 16th, it went to zero because I closed down all the dining rooms across our system. And boy, just the way we were operating in the dark back then, everything was so unprecedented. And so I made a couple of very immediate moves. Keep in mind, we're just at that point, we're 4 days into this. I stopped collecting royalty because this was unheard of to think that you would go negative 25% comp. In fact, we did some quick calculations, and knowing the typical financials, and by the way, the advice I give to everybody in every brand, if you don't understand your unit level economics, you're in trouble under the best of circumstances. I mean, in the restaurant business, it is built upon the foundation of what happens at the unit level, and you better understand the typical P&L and really what it takes to make money. And so our estimation, because we do understand it, was that maybe our system could withstand a negative 30% comp. And if it settled at that level, and perhaps if it held there, we'd lose a lot of restaurants. We stood to lose perhaps hundreds of restaurants in the portfolio, but the brand could survive. The upper tiers of our system would survive. We would make our way through it in some way. But if we knew if sales dropped below 30%, we could be in some real serious trouble. And so we came out of the weekend, mid 20%. And then that Monday and Tuesday came and it dipped below 30%. And by the end of the week, it was in negative 40% range. Sunday came, by the way, I'd already turned off the royalties. I turned off the advertising payments because right away, understanding the unit dynamics, I had to keep every dollar in the pocket of my franchisees. And this is, I think, one of the pivotal things in leadership. I'm a firm believer when we call mission style orders. I don't micromanage anything. There was one fundamental mission style order that I gave my entire team at the very start of the pandemic. Every decision we make is going to be rooted in keeping restaurants open. Because when a restaurant closes, especially in a franchise system, a restaurant closes, we lose control of our destiny. Even though a franchisee may believe, not knowing what's ahead, maybe they believe that it's in their best interest now to close it down, and with the intent of opening it back up. Oh, once it's closed, it's anybody's bet. You are now in the realm of the unknown. So everything, and literally, I told the team, every decision we make is rooted in that. Does it help us keep a restaurant open or not? If it doesn't, if it's counter to that, then it's a bad call. So to fast forward a little bit, we were tremendously successful at that in a system of almost 1,200 restaurants. The highest number of restaurants we ever had closed temporarily during the pandemic was 40. That was it. And on a temporary basis. So we were tremendously successful at that. And it was rooted really, I think, in that cultural decision or what I call that mission style order. But we saw sales dropping in the negative 40 range. And so the second Sunday after the pandemic started, that Sunday, we were 52% negative. And I think my team, if you asked any of them throughout this, I had one main mission as CEO. I had to be the voice of optimism. I had to be no woe is me. No, I mean, we focused every day. In fact, a key effort my mantra was, look, we're not even going to talk about comp sales. It's irrelevant what we were doing last year. What are we going to do with that information? I said, I don't want to hear about it. I want to talk about it. All I know is, I know what we did yesterday. And we are going to do something today. I don't care if it's $1 more in sales, but we've got to do something, take action to increase sales. And when we get to the end of today, we're going to take a look at what we did, and we're going to look at tomorrow, and we're going to figure out what it is we're going to do tomorrow that's going to make tomorrow better than today was. And we're going to rinse it, and we'll repeat it, and we're going to do it every day until we get back. And that was our mantra for weeks. One day after another, keep doing something, because it doesn't, you can't count on luck or fate to do it. You've got to do something decisively to try to drive it. And I would say part of that is you've got to keep optimism up. I mean, what good is going to come out of being pessimistic? And there's a difference. I don't ever suggest that people are Pollyannish, and I'm realistically optimistic. But you find the things you can rally around and be as positive as possible, because that will be reflected in your people, and then the experiences they deliver in your restaurant, and it helps pull you out. So at that Sunday, we were 52% negative. And I will admit to myself, I wouldn't share it with my team at the time, but I was really starting to worry, because where is the bottom? At some point, you got to figure when you've hit the bottom and how you're going to start coming up. And that Monday, the day after that, we were 48% negative. I was never so happy in my life to be 48% negative, because it signaled the start of coming back up. And through a variety of analytics that we were able to take a look at, we actually determined that we had hit the bottom of our trough at the end of just about 14 days. And we ended up being right. And because we were looking at analytics from our loyalty user base, because we could really gauge their behavior and use a lot of analytics and figured, all right, that's the bottom. Now we start to climb. It's a mirror. It's somewhat miraculous. Certainly a result of everybody's hard work and the optimism and everything else. We ended up starting to turn positive comps over the year prior after 9 weeks in the pandemic. And since that point in time until today, we've had record sales every single week.
And Don, before you, the next question is to tell us the rest of from that period, how and where you are now and how you got there. But before you do that, I am intrigued, because I heard you mention the word communication a lot, and that you were kind of the leader with this with the positive attitude. But how did you communicate with all those franchisees?
Yeah, I started a daily blog, and I love to write. I'm an author. It's a strong suit for me. And there's a lot of different type of communication vehicles you can use. But what I decided is for consistency. I would do it through we have an internal intranet site communication, and we branded the blog, and I wrote it myself, and every day, 7 days a week, didn't miss a Saturday or a Sunday, every day putting messages on there about what we would do, highlighting successes we were having in different parts of our system, because some of the best practices we developed were coming from our franchise community. A franchisee did a great job of launching a pop-up drive-through. Wasn't on an end cap. I think he took a tent out, put it in the parking lot, hardwired a point of sale device to go out there, and made an impromptu drive-through lane out in the parking lot, because every other storefront was closed.
So he had it.
He had the space. So, and normally a landlord would have shut him down. There was nobody out there. So you break all the rules. You go out there. You do what you need to do creatively, and so we share things like that constantly. Some operators started selling grocery items, bulk meat.
Right.
So I use the blog to push that information out there. And again, keep a very optimistic air. Keep everybody uplifted. So that worked well, and really almost solely that, because I didn't do much. We did a little bit of video work and so on, but within the culture of our system, that was a good.
Well, that was a big deal. So how then? So you led your way out of the negative territory, or at least decrease the negative territory, and take us through how you got to today, and where are you today?
Yeah. So, this is amazing. We got a little bit lucky. As I mentioned, we stopped collecting the advertising dollars because I need to keep. Normally, we collect 5% for advertising. 4% goes into a co-op fund, which airs advertising, and 1% goes into what we call our system fund, which actually pays for creative development and agency fees. But we had some money in the bank for the fund because we were coming up. The timing of our calendar is that we usually do quarterly promotions, and they take place typically at the front end of the quarter. So we were scheduled to go on air in April, anyway, with a Q2 promotion. We delayed it because we're only 2 weeks into the pandemic, and we're still figuring out what was going on. So we had the dollars reserved, and we had enough money in the bank, in the fund, to air 3 weeks of advertising. So we rolled it about 3 weeks after it was originally intended. Mostly just, we shifted the message, changed the creative on the fly, emphasized three things actually. Number one, we're open. Number two, here's how you can use us. And we promoted what we call our rapid rescue, which is our online ordering, because the dining rooms were closed and so on. And also we still made sure that we mentioned the work we do in our community through our Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation, not walking away from our philanthropic roots. We felt that was still a very important part of the message. And by the way, just to fast forward, I think one of the reasons we're enjoying success too is because our customers, our guests, they're aware of what we do, are rewarding us, I think, for the work we've done in the communities all these years. But the luck element was that the week we went on air with the advertising was the first, coincided with the arrival of the stimulus checks, the $1,200 per person, not the PPP money, but the individual stimulus checks. And one thing that we saw throughout the industry data is that despite being at a peak lockdown period, fear of the unknown with the virus, when the consumer got $1,200, they were going to spend it.
Right. That made a difference.
And they were going to spend it in restaurants, not universally, but people who felt comfortable going out. And we clearly then benefited from being on air and heightening awareness of the fact we were open. Because in the era, as I think everybody listening in that experienced the pandemic, and everybody would have, when it first happens, you don't know who's open, who's not, what's closing. You have to go through a personal discovery period. And most of the places you might shop at or do business aren't advertising per se. So it is a long period of time, perhaps, before you're developing awareness on who's operating and under what conditions they're operating.
Don, we have about 2 minutes left. There's a question that's come in from our listeners.
Sure.
It's also one of the same questions I had written down. If you could just in a minute or so give us your reaction or your experience of how third-party delivery has or has not worked.
Sure. Yeah, our third-party delivery prior to the pandemic was about 6.5% of sales. We've been encouraging operators to use the programs for the past 2 to 3 years. At the peak of the pandemic, we went up in dollars about 2.5x, and then it came down. So right now we run about 2x. We are seeing it move up a little bit right now because of some resurgence in the virus. But I think that at least for our segment of the industry, I think what the pandemic has revealed is some weaknesses in the third party, because I cannot foresee a set of circumstances where demand for delivery would be any higher.
Right.
Yet, at a peak of historic demand, the third-party companies are still not profitable.
Yeah.
So the business model from the third-party company's perspective is still in need of much work, and I don't know how they're ever going to make it successful.
That's it. But of course, you've been also paying a premium for that too, right?
Correct. And what has happened, and this is more typical than not for restaurant operators have to raise the price on the third-party platform to help compensate for commission fees that are, depending on the brand and your check average, 20, 30% or more in some cases, and your normal business model from the restaurant's perspective really can't sustain those levels of commissions. So you offset it with price, and price elasticity comes into play, and now we can see as people got past the peak demand time period with the pandemic, usage is going down. And I think in the end, third-party delivery will be good for some brands, mostly driven by what kind of check average you have. It has to be a combination of good cuisine and packaging that's compatible with a good experience, combined with your check average. And I think where you'll see it fade is from the QSRs. Those are loss leaders right now.
Sure. Well, Don, we're out of time, and I got the time went really fast. Gosh. But I want to let you know and let our audience know that I will be issuing you an invitation. I hope you'll accept it, to be one of our distinguished speakers this coming semester, which then you have an hour and 15 minutes. And,
well, sure, I'd love to. Yeah,
and it'd be a lot of fun. And we broadcast that on YouTube, so through the M3 Center. So Don Fox, thank you very much. And just so the audience knows, you have written 2 books. One of them is Patent's Vanguard, and you wrote The Final Battles of Patent. So you're a great historian and a great restaurateur. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks very much, Pat. I really enjoyed being with you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pat, and also Mr. Don Fox. What a great talk and interview. I would like to let you know that we are 5,600 participants strong in this program, and we are thrilled to be part of this program. Today, as you can already have listened to the interview, we started this tradition. Dean Moyes de Mayem has hosted several guests, and Dr. Pat Morio followed the tradition today with Mr. Don Fox, the CEO of the Firehouse Subs. Today, it's going to be our 6th week lecture, and we have 2 instructors today. I would like to introduce first Ms. Casi Johnson. She's going to talk about the financial considerations within the hospitality industry. Before I bring her up here, I would like to just tell you a quick story about Ms. Casi Johnson. She is one of our adjunct professors. She's teaching hospitality accounting, but also she is the Chief Operating Officer for M3 Company. You may have noticed that I have M3 Center behind as my background. That name actually comes from the M3 Company. The M3 Accounting and Analytics Company, our chairman and one of the owners, Mr. John McKibben, has donated a multi-million-dollar gift to the University of South Florida. And hence, we have created M3 Center for Hospitality, Technology, and Innovation, which actually puts together this program along with all the faculty of the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management at the University of South Florida. So I would like to thank Casi and John, the entire M3 and McKibben family, for their great contribution. As you can see, it's not just the donation that they are making, but they are also donating their time in our students and, of course, in this program. So without further ado, Casi, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today. I'm very excited. I think we're going to show my slides in just a moment. There we go. Okay, I'm going to get started to talk about the most exciting topic, hospitality managerial accounting. I will focus heavily on hotels because that is my background, so I have a lot of information to share on that, but we will also talk about restaurants and such. All right, so as I go through this presentation, I am going to be able to rely on industry experts and sources. So some things that you can do on your own time and follow along is I encourage you to go to these sites. American Hotel Lodging Association, that's an industry trade group that spends a lot of time and energy supporting the hospitality industry. They speak to Congress frequently on the state of the industry and things that are needed to have representation in DC. So they do a fabulous job promoting the industry, putting out publications. So please, if you haven't already signed up to follow along with them, do so. STR, I'm sure everyone in the hotel business is familiar. Their marketing data worldwide provides hoteliers access to information where they can compare themselves to their competitors in their specific market segmentation. SiteMinder is actually a guest acquisition platform. They connect to 400 booking channels for about 35,000 hotels. So they also have access to a lot of information, and they put out blogs consistently, so you can follow along with their publications. HotStats is a global financial benchmarking organization. We actually partner with them to share information on behalf of M3 Get customers. They actually will take a P&L and provide comparison to like hotels, so you can see how you're tracking against other properties' profitability. USALI is important to mention anytime you talk about a P&L for a hotel. So that's Uniform System of Accounts for the lodging industry. They first published in 1926, and they really help outline and format a P&L so it can be consistent across management companies, ownership groups, and various interested parties. So they try to outline a typical format for a P&L and what gets classified where. So that's also very helpful for consistency. And then, of course, follow along in multiple trade outlets. I'm not actually showing all of them here, so I just wanted to provide you a few things that you can look up on your own time. All right, let's talk about the industry current state for hotels. I know a lot of people have already talked about this topic. So SiteMinder, remember they have access to 35,000 properties. They are showcasing booking pace. So if you haven't heard the term before, don't worry. If you have, I apologize for breaking it down in an elementary way, but booking pace is simply looking ahead at how many reservations you have on the book for, let's say, the next 30, 60, 90 days, comparing it to the same time last year, how many reservations you had on the book at that point. So you can see easily here where April is really where things took a nosedive, as you've probably heard multiple times throughout your sessions, and then a slight recovery, not as prominent as the status quo in January and February, but a slight recovery going into the summer months, and then just some slight variation throughout the year, both global and you can see the domestic here in the United States, how that has evolved. Now, STR provided some information the week ending November 21st. Let me blow that up a little bit for you. So they have occupancy at 41.2%. They also reported ADR was at $88.54. Now, this was down 29% over last year, whereas occupancy was down 32.6% from last year, which inevitably impacted RevPAR, which I'll go into all these definitions in a little while so you can be ready for your quiz. So don't forget the quiz at the end. So RevPAR is actually $36.45 that week of ending November 21st. That's down 52.2%. So again, you can see the low point in April, some slight recovery. And of course, recovery is not evenly distributed, right? There are some coastal cities that recovered a little bit more than others, like Tampa had some good luck through the summer months. And so that's just going to be very specific to where you are and where the market is. Now, some key terms. You cannot talk about financial accounting or managerial accounting without really understanding the key terms and what this represents from a financial perspective. So assets are resources available for use by the business, anything owned by the business that has value. Right, you can think land, building, FF&E, equipment, fixtures, that sort of thing. Liabilities, opposite of assets, of course, are obligations of a business, things that you owe to other people. It might be a mortgage, it might be short-term liabilities like an invoice that you haven't paid yet. So I'm trying to keep it all at a very high level. So if you have questions along the way, please go ahead and send those, and we'll be monitoring those throughout the session. All right, owner's equity. That's actually the financial interest of the owners in the business. Simply put, it's assets minus liabilities, right? That's what the owners have in the property. And then we know income. I'm sure everyone's very familiar with that. That's just all revenue collected for an operation. That could include the room revenue, but also the food and beverage revenue, catering, sundries, gift shop, so on and so forth. And expenses. That's the cost required to purchase things that actually support the revenue of the property. All right, so now we're actually going to take a poll, and we're going to pop the poll up on the screen. Okay, take a picture of the QR code. All right, now let's see those results. So what is the highest category of expenses in hotels? Let's see what we came up with. All right. So labor, okay, very good. I'm very pleased with that answer because that is accurate. So very happy that everyone went through that. Cleaning supplies was a good guess. We know that's actually increasing, and I'll mention that a little bit later. Utilities and room supplies. Okay, so very good. That's excellent. Okay. All right, let's see the results of the second question. What is the highest category of expenses in a restaurant? All right. Food cost and labor. So that's also very good answers. Rent is pretty high as well. So it is about a tie between labor and food cost. You know, that really is dependent on the type of restaurant. So food costs typically 28 to 32%, around that range. And then labor costs for full service is 30 to 35%, whereas a limited service restaurant might be 25 to 30%. So they're very close, food cost and labor cost. Okay, well, good job, everybody. So that's pretty exciting. You guys know your stuff. All right, some more key terms, maybe not on the quiz. So let's go through that. So everything relates to, of course, how many rooms you can sell in a property, right? So the inventory of a hotel actually is finite, right? You can't add more rooms tomorrow to make up for rooms you didn't sell today. So your inventory perishes every single day. So everyone is really trying to maximize occupancy on a daily basis. So every day you're going to look at your calculation, which is simply rooms sold divided by the total available rooms at the property, and you're going to represent that as a percentage. The average daily rate, also critical component, right? So might be easy to sell a room for $25 a night, but are you going to make money at that rate? So obviously we want to measure this ongoing every single day. Total room revenue divided by rooms sold, that's shown as a dollar amount. And then really the combination of the two, occupancy and ADR, is your revenue per available room, also known as RevPAR, total room revenue divided by rooms available. That really helps you understand the overall impact of the combination of occupancy and ADR so that you know where your profitability lies for that property. Per occupied room, this is allowing a hotelier to measure really their variable cost per occupied room, because the costs are different if the room's vacant versus someone stays in the room. You know, obviously you've got those additional room supplies that you have to replenish, and now with COVID cleanliness protocols, you've got additional, you know, plastic sleeves on the remote control, stickers on the doors to show that it's been cleaned. Lots of different initiatives that properties have used throughout this year to make sure the guests are comfortable. So that all factors into the per occupied room variable cost so that you understand how much more are you spending every time a guest comes to the hotel and stays. Break-even unit. So we really look at this as break-even occupancy, but this has been a new hot topic throughout the pandemic, right? Hoteliers are forced to make a decision quite frequently whether or not to stay open or close the property temporarily, depending on where their occupancy is. So they really need to understand that break-even point to make some of those decisions. So it's simply the factor of taking your total fixed cost divided by the price per unit, which is your average daily rate, we already talked about that, minus your variable cost per unit. So that's your per occupied room cost for those variable expenses. So once you have that information and can factor that in, you can then turn that into your occupancy break-even point by dividing it by available rooms. So again, trying to keep it high level. We only have 30 minutes to learn everything about managerial accounting, but break even, practice this, think about it, work that into some of your studies so that you can be familiar with that calculation. And then gross operating profit, probably the easiest way to understand a manager's effectiveness at a hotel, because it is the total revenue minus all the operating expenses. So that's all your departmental expenses, your undistributed expenses, admin, which is like general managers and salaried people, maintenance, utilities, everything that you need to run the day-to-day of the hotel, that's factored into the operating expenses. So GOP, otherwise known as, gross operating profit, as a percentage of revenue, is used quite frequently. So we're going to actually take a couple more polls, take time for a couple more questions. Okay, so some of the results now. So first question, what's the typical hotel break-even occupancy percent? So I'm trying to read this correct. Okay, so it looks like the majority selected 35%. All right, so let's go back and look at the slide for a second. So HotStats did an analysis back in May 2020, and the actual break-even point at that point for overall was 37.3%. So nicely done, close to 35. Now, STR had data through June when they looked at profitability. The full service properties actually had a 50% break even. Limited service properties were at 45%. So basically it costs more money, obviously, to run a full service property. So the more money it takes to run that property, the more occupancy you need to break even. So everyone was kind of factoring that into their decisions and how much they could sustain for keeping the hotel open. So break even has become a very critical component of managerial accounting this year. All right, let's look at the next question results. What is the typical gross operating profit? And we're going to pull those results up. Let's see what everybody guessed. Okay, so majority selected 25%. Okay, well, it's probably a little bit of a tricky question, right? Because you're thinking, is she asking about 2019? Is she asking about 2020? It looks like the answers are pretty evenly distributed. So let's go back and look at those results. So on the 2019 CBRE reported through August of last year, the average was 34.4%. And then, of course, this year through August, 2020 was 16.7%. So a huge difference between year over year, which we know that. But in fact, all of the properties that they looked at through August of 2020 were achieving a positive GOP margin, which means hoteliers have really gotten creative to figure out how to manage their expenses through this crisis and really try to get as much as they can out of every purchase. Question, do we see the per occupied room number affecting the rate that rooms are sold at, even if the occupancy rates are low? So let me see if I can interpret this question correctly. So, right, so your average rate is really going to drive that occupancy required to break even, right? The lower the rate, the more occupancy you need. So rate is really hard to manage through a crisis. And once you start lowering the rate, it's really, really hard to recover that later, because you set precedent with your buyers, and there's all this, normalization that people think, well, why do I pay more for this room now when I only paid this before? So yes, it really does contribute, managing your average rate for you to achieve the right blend for the break even at the property. So there is definitely a relationship there. Hope I answered the question that was intended. All right, so let's go to the next thing. All right, so driving the hotel performance, this is no different than any other time. It just became very, very critical through COVID. There's some key factors that everyone could really pay close attention to, which they already have, because everyone has gotten creative. Everyone I've talked to has really, figured out how to do more with less. So labor expenses, as we already learned, is one of the highest categories of expenses, not just for restaurants, but also for hotels. So hoteliers really scaled down throughout the pandemic, really got creative on managing, like I said, more with less. Yes, so furloughs and laid off workers, unfortunately, were a result of just not having enough money in the property. And that did help somewhat of managing GOP, but not in total, right? There's still a lot of overhead at a property. So, and we know labor cost is going to go up if cleanliness factors and variables that have been implemented this year, if those are maintained going forward, if that's the expectation and everyone maintains this for a certain amount of time, right? Thorough cleanings, having all these extra steps that we take to prep the room for the next guest, obviously that does increase the cost for cleanliness. And then also the room supplies, all of the things that are purchased to protect the remote control, and, not reusing pins and all kinds of things. All right, so then the other variable, obviously we need to have strong revenue management. That's a whole nother class and discipline. So I don't spend a whole lot of time on that today, but as I mentioned earlier, finding the right rate and blend of rate and occupancy for your hotel is very, very critical to manage through any normal situation, but especially through the crisis. So you've got to really pay attention to your market reports. You really need to study what competitors are doing. You really need to go, over and above to make sure you're getting the maximum rate that you can. The same thing, of course, for restaurants, trying to increase the average check per cover. I mean, that's very critical throughout this entire process. And then for forecasting accuracy, I want to spend a little bit more time talking about forecasting, right? This is the new norm. Budgets are completed before a year even begins. So by January 2020, budgets were already kind of outdated. But then, of course, when things started shifting in March and then April took a nosedive, the budget was completely outdated. It was no longer useful information, nothing that would have helped anyone manage their business more effectively. So everyone had to pivot and make sure they had proper forecasting. So forecasting is allowing you to essentially take a budget and then modify it ongoing, right? You're adjusting for your booking pace that we talked about earlier. You're adjusting for the changes in rate or ADR. You're adjusting for the volume and the demand, the changes in occupancy. And then you're making sure that all of those things are really in sync and that you're paying attention to that. And you need to go back and compare what you're forecasting to what actually happened week over week. So then you know if you're doing a good job managing proactively through those forecasts, or if you need to tweak your methods. Because having an accurate forecast is going to allow you to manage your expenses ongoing. So some simple forecasting steps. Again, high level, trying to just walk through this for you quickly. You really need to start with the rooms demand or the volume or covers for restaurants. You know, how many people are we going to serve? How many people are going to stay on property? Your expenses that are variable, meaning they change for every new person that you serve, they really need to be set up as a calculation based on a percentage of your revenue or your per occupied room variation. So when you adjust in the forecast how many rooms you expect to have occupied, will automatically adjust your expenses. Then compare that to last year budget and the new market trends. So, right, how were hoteliers forecasting when you can't compare to last year? Now, what we're looking for now is not necessarily a trend to last year, but we did shift, and a lot of people now are looking at the trend compared to last month. Right? Am I gaining any profitability month over month? Meaning, have we adjusted enough? Mr. Fox from Firehouse Subs earlier talked about how every day they say is tomorrow. You know, what are we going to do better than what we did today to keep incrementally improving? And you're somewhat doing that with your forecast now. You can look at it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. But how are we doing compared to last month? So that is more appropriate for current state. And then review your accuracy ongoing, right? Compare to what you just forecasted to what actually happens for a given week. And are you close or are you missing the mark? Wanted to show you some examples really quick of how forecasting can continue to help you evolve your business. I just want to show you really quick. This sample is actual data through October, and then there's forecast for the rest of the year, allowing this hotel to forecast the total profitability for the remainder of the year. Now, as we see in April, you know, revenue is in the negative territory, negative 443. So how did that impact their GOP? How are they able to manage through that loss? So this particular example shows that GOP is at a negative 80,000, right? So they were able to manage through some of their expenses, but you can see there's still overhead, right? There's still expenses that they have no matter somebody stays at the property or not. Now the next example, also pretty interesting how they managed through. So they actually had positive revenue of 22,000. But their GOP is at a negative 102,000. So really what has happened here, this property is more expensive to operate. So perhaps there's more rooms on property, larger space, more square footage, you know, more utilities required, you know, that sort of thing. So, you know, it is really going to be dependent on each hotel and, you know, what their needs are. So what are the next steps for you out in the world trying to figure out what to do next? And hopefully this has given you a little bit more insight, but you can please get connected with M3 on LinkedIn. Just go to LinkedIn and you can search for M3-accounting. We should be the first thing that pops up when you do that. Follow the industry. I provided you a lot of resources earlier, so make sure you're staying connected, follow along, and study the financial statements. You know, try to seek out sample P&Ls, make sure you understand the lingo, make sure you understand the relationship of revenue and fixed expenses and variable expenses and how you can manage that more effectively. And if you have additional follow-up questions, you can simply write us at sales@m3as.com. We'll monitor that, and if there's just general questions, we're happy to try to answer those. If you want any more information on M3, happy to answer those as well. So that's my time for the day, and if there's any last minute questions, we're happy to do that. Oh, here we go. Experts say due to the pandemic and change in buying habits for consumers, people will look at Airbnb. Do I agree? You know, I think Airbnb really helps support markets where maybe there isn't as much supply. So I don't know that it's going to have a huge long-term effect, not any more than it already has in the industry, but it is certainly something to monitor and watch, and within your own market, figure out how that impacts your specific business, because it is going to be different all over the world and what that happens. So thank you everyone for allowing me to join today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Casi, so much. This was so wonderful, and thanks also for sharing with us some real numbers. And that is what we do with our partnership with M3 company, that they allow us to share real figures with our students all around the world, not just University of South Florida students, but thousands of students from everywhere. We would like to thank you for being our professor and also for everything that you're doing for the University of South Florida. Thank you.
Wonderful job, Cassie. Yeah, that was wonderful.
Adam, the floor is yours now.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. If you would like to go ahead and we can start, we're going to walk through a really fun entrepreneurial exercise. So what we're going to do is an entrepreneurial case study in the age of COVID. Now, a colleague of mine, a dear friend and a fellow professor, Professor Don Wood, worked on this with me, and we put this together, but unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it tonight, so I'll be doing this solo, but we'll hopefully get Professor Wood on another night. He's spectacular, and you will love him. So the next slide, please. Hospitality and Power Perspectives. So a little background as to why I and my fellow professor, Don Wood, would be talking to you about entrepreneur. We've been entrepreneurs collectively for 70 years, 30 on my side, over 40 on his side. And we've specialized in food and beverage, and we've dabbled in many other opportunities that come along. Started very different types of businesses that are all under the hospitality umbrella. And what this does is gives us real hands-on experience, both professionally and academically. Professor Wood has taught for almost 2 decades. I've taught for about 3 decades now in academia. And marrying those two, the professional and the academic, is what we want to bring to you with this case study. So if we could have the next slide, that would be fabulous. I think it would be fun to look at this as a different type of an experience, not so much a lecture as a share, not so much a talking to as a talking with. So if you look at one of the great business schools in the world, of course, we're part of one here at Muma College of Business at the University of South Florida. This is from the London School of Economics. And Dr. Muthu Krishna explained, to be an entrepreneur, you have to both think you have a better chance of success than other people and be confident about that belief, even though most businesses will fail. If you think you're better than other people but aren't confident in that, you're probably a wantrepreneur. You think about starting a business but never pull the trigger. Dawn and I, we look at the term entrepreneur as a verb. So I want you to think in your head, not entrepreneur as anything except for an action, because it's action that gets entrepreneurs into actual business. Next slide. So this is going to take the form of a case study. And it's important to understand why and what a case study is and why we chose to use that. So case studies are essentially experiential learning shared through academic rigor. The case for case studies in business education was made in the early 1980s at Harvard. So Harvard Business School brings together these amazingly talented people, all these diverse backgrounds, and then the majority of the talking is mostly an active listening, really, by the students and the professor. In this particular environment, we're going to do a version that's demonstrated the power of a case study, but through this virtual and live platform, which means we'll be able to interact with you through questions that you have. Next slide, please. Deconstructing an entrepreneurial venture, you need to understand some of these different ideas that come through here. The ideation, everything starts with an idea, right? To be an entrepreneur, you need an idea. You need some big thought. Then you have these barriers to entry. Competition's an interesting thing. We're brought up in this country to compete, the United States. And this Western idea of capitalism has gone global, and we have a global audience here today. And competition drives a lot of business. Peter Thiel, or Peter Thiel actually is the way you pronounce his last name, born in Germany, he's been in the United States the majority of his life, went to Stanford undergrad, Stanford Law. He, you would know him best as being one of the founders of PayPal, in addition to being the initial investor in Facebook, SpaceX, and others. So this is no small-minded person. This is someone who's been on the forefront as an entrepreneur and as an investor from the beginning of this technological whirlwind that we've been experiencing for the last 20 plus years. And his thesis, Peter's thesis is, there's no such thing as competition, that no competition is actually the better play. And we'll touch on that in a little while because the example we're going to walk through exemplifies this. So the traditional approach to competition, especially here in the United States, is just win, baby. Win at all costs. Go out there and make money. There's many things that go when we start a venture. The risk assessment, the market, financing, is there debt, is there equity? How long will you allow for the venture to survive? What are your exit plans? Do you have exit plans? Entrepreneurship requires leadership and planning, which harkens back, of course, to the first course in this crisis management, this post-crisis, post-COVID series. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I want to introduce you to a new product. This product is called Eve's Blind. Eve's Blind is an internet-based business, and we're going to walk through the idea. It's selling both a physical product and a virtual product. It's a simple and elegant design, very easy to understand with regards to where it came from and how it manifested itself. And of course, the idea is to have an elegant design because it's the elegant design that allows you to focus. So this is contemporary to 2020. It's so new. Pardon me. It is so new that it actually broke ground and went live in October of 2020. So this is during COVID. Next slide, please. So is there potential competition? Well, this is an online website-based deliverable. So you have online retailers and opportunities driven by technology. Therefore, of course, prior we had them all brick and mortar shops. And that's been the norm for a couple hundred years now. Other online businesses focused on whiskey sales. That's right, this is a whiskey product. Flaviar, Decanta, Caskers. They even have advent calendars from all these other brands. And what has happened because of these other brands and doing the business that they've done, they have some legal precedents that may have helped Eve's Blind. Of course, they may support Eve's Blind. They may also be a little harmful. They may have created new barriers to entry. So potential competition is very interesting and very important to understand and to look at. One of the things I want you to remember here is that this is not just a whiskey brand. It's a bourbon brand. So if I could have the next slide, we're going to start having some fun. So Eve's Blind, the clarity of the revenue stream and the idea. So Eve's Blind is named after Marianne Eves. Marianne Eves was the first female master distiller in the history of a major distillery in the United States. She leveraged her name in the market for immediate market share. This was the goal, this was the idea, this was the belief, this was the passion, this is the buy-in. You can only buy this product online through the website. There's no storefront, there's no brick and mortar, nothing. It's pitched as both an educational experience and a mobile laboratory. So higher education, which is where we are right now at the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management. So let's walk through some of the numbers, because I think you'll find the numbers, and I'm going to do some basic numbers because I think this will show you some of the advantages that you have with the technology that's around. And the reason we're showing you this business is because during COVID, you would think, why would I open a business during COVID? There's always a time for an entrepreneur to open a business. There's always a time for a pivot. If you hadn't noticed pivots before COVID, you've seen dozens and dozens and dozens of them during COVID. So the total product cost for the aficionado package was $550 to the customers. So what does that mean? It means if you wanted to buy what she called the aficionado package, that was like the connoisseur package, the high-end package. There were two. The entry package was $300. We're not concerned with that for this case study. We're just going to do the aficionado package. So $550, that's how much it cost. That is what someone like myself would pay. And I went through the whole website and did this all so I could report to you. Now, let's suggest a goal, because you have to have a goal for the number of customers. Well, she doesn't have a big business behind her. She is the business for the most part. So let's say she did 1,000 customers at this $550 aficionado package. Next slide, please. What Miss Eves would be looking at is 1,000 customers as the initial goal at $550 per for that aficionado package. So she could gross $500,000, $550,000 in gross revenue from just 1,000 people. Just 1,000 people. That's not a lot of people in the United States. And we have tons of people. Andy, you're asking, was she known? She's very famous, tons of write-ups. It's a brilliant question. And that is the question. Was she known enough to leverage her name? Welcome to the case study. That is the point. One of the major points of this case study. So we will get there. Very good question. So let's say we had 2,000 customers. 2,000 customers, I mean, you could do that in a normal restaurant when times are decent in a day or two. Now, customers with over $1 million at that number, you've got over $1 million with 2,000 customers, 1,100,000, and so on and so forth. So she doesn't need to do a lot of customers to do a lot of revenue, but revenue is only one part of the formula. So let's take a look at the next slide and see what happens here. And now we're going to dive down a little bit to show you some of the things that are going on. A standard bourbon barrel, and the product here is bourbon. Not all whiskey is bourbon, but all bourbon is whiskey. So it's not single malt scotch. It's not from India. It's not from Ireland. It is not anything but bourbon. That's what she's known for. That was where her name was made, was in the bourbon business as a master distiller. In the United States, which is the only place you can make bourbon. So bourbon is a name that is unique to the United States, like champagne is to France. That's a good combination for you to think of in your head. It's 53 gallons. 53 gallons translates to about 195 liters. That's important to know, because although here in the United States, we don't really use the metric system, we do when it comes to liquor and bottling. So we do, typical bourbon bottle is 750 milliliters. There are other sizes, but that's the size of a wine bottle and the size of most bourbon bottles. When you account, when you do the math on 195 liters and you lose some through evaporation, that's called the angel share, You lose some of the liquid from going in and becoming part of the wood. I call that the devil's cut. After all of that and adding a little water afterwards, typically you'll get about 200 bottles, 750 milliliter bottles from a 53-gallon bourbon barrel. Next slide, please. This is important to know because each aficionado will receive approximately 1.5 bottles, or each barrel will produce 133 typical bottles, right? Everyone follow me on this? This is important to know because if you're getting 133 customers per barrel, it's not bottles, it's typical customers. That's a misprint from me. Each aficionado will receive 1.5 bottles. And if you go back to the slide before this, please, you'll see that there's 200 bottles typically in a 53-gallon bourbon barrel. And I have a misprint on the next slide. Next slide, please. So the aficionado is going to receive samples over the course of the year that add up to 1.5 bottles, which would mean 133 customers, typical aficionado customers, would be served from each barrel. With barrel costs about $4,000 to $15,000 a barrel without any industry connections, Eves was or is a master distiller, so we can't forget that. That's a very important notion to keep in your head. So she obviously has serious connections. Figure a maximum of about $3,500. She's probably looking at maybe zero. Maybe she's got some that she can get donated. Maybe she's got some sitting around. I don't know. But she's going to have these connections which bring her cost down. So if you do the math, and let's say $3,500 for a barrel, and you get 133 customers out of a barrel, it's only the cost of the bourbon, and the bourbon alone is $26 per aficionado. Let's not forget, she's charging $550 per aficionado. So you're not paying just for the bourbon. You're paying for other things. You're paying for her name, her expertise, all of the things that's going on. What are you paying for? The branding and the packaging, the gorgeous holotype design and packaging that we're going to cover on the next slide. Next slide, please. Look at this. How gorgeous is that? This is sleek. It's elegant. It looks expensive. Here's what you're looking at. So if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see she has her name prominently displayed because why? Because that is what you're selling. Remember I told you the brand was a product and a person? This is what it is. The brand is her, and the extension of her is the product itself, which is this kit. So if we look in the middle, that in the middle you have 2 glasses on the bottom, and on either side of the glasses, those are those larger containers, those are water, and that water isn't that sleek, Ann? I agree. That water is actually from Stills in Kentucky, where she is sourcing this product. The 4 little bottles with the corks on them on the outside that are facing in that go like this, that's the actual whiskey. So you get 4 samples of whiskey that she has either hand-picked or hand-blended. So you get her expertise here. And that beautiful little container in the middle with the odd stopper on top, there it is. Thank you, Jihan. That is actually an eyedropper. And the eyedropper is so that you can add water to it as part of this whole package that she's pitching. Very elegant, very tight, gorgeous. The glasses on the bottom are Glencairn whiskey glasses. These are perhaps the most famous glasses in the world, and those are jet black. I don't know if you can tell from the picture. Everything is black. Just unbelievably gorgeous. Yes, the intangibles, Gary, are unbelievable here. So the packaging here is second to none. This packaging looks like $550, but wait, as the aficionado, you get 4 of these a year. It's not clear if you get just packaging like this with 4 samples, or you get 4 complete kits like this a year. I think you're getting 4 complete kits. So let's break the kit down a little bit. The expensive part of this kit, Holotype is a very, very high-end advertising and branding agency. They're brilliant, as you can see. So that's no small that's no small amount of money that has been put forward for this. It looks like they spent money, and she did spend money. In addition, you have these little bottles. You have the foam cut out, so the insert, so you can put everything in there. You can't just buy 2 glasses. You have to buy, so everything's going to be bought with a certain amount of bulk. But again, these are not expensive. I personally owned the biggest whiskey bar and tasting facility in the country, the Whiskey Attic. We had over 5,000 different whiskeys, and we do professional tasting for the last 15 years. So this particular product is near and dear to my heart. I look at this and I just think it's brilliant because this is really clear. Let me see. You need to see the color of the product to appreciate the depth of the caramelization aging legs. So this is interesting. Dr. DeWan, I would tell you that just because these are the glasses that come with it doesn't mean that's what you would use at home. Because a whiskey aficionado probably has 4, 5, 8, 50 different glasses that they like to use. And you can use that. But she's going to be walking you through different types of tastings and things using this. And maybe she doesn't want you to see the color, because what she wants you to do is focus on other sensory perception attributes. Having said that, let's go to these are great questions. Keep them coming. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is a different angle with some light on it so you can see the depth. And there is a live video. ND, there is a live video that goes with this. And she's lovely. You would love to meet her. So if you look at this, you can see the glasses are actually opaque. They are black. But if you can go to the left and the right all the way on those bottles, you can see Eve's has her logo on them. And it almost looks like cups that you'd use for backgammon or something, the way this set is. It's nice, it's sleek. Obviously, this isn't just some cheap foam. This is high-end, really well made. I'm here to tell you it's still not expensive. But I'm also here to tell you the bottles, the glasses, the eyedropper, and all of these things cost more than the bourbon. So it's possible with low sales that she could be in for twice as much, right? So maybe she's at $75 a person on the aficionado. If you'd be kind enough to go to the next slide. This is her. So she's actually married to a gentleman who's got a circus. She's a lot of fun, but you can see how approachable she is, how typically American, Southern, Western she looks. Yes, the package is $550. Now, here's another interesting thing about the package. When you go to checkout, it gives you an option for delivery. If you would like it delivered normally, it's another almost $100. If you want it overnighted, it's actually more money than the $550. It's almost $600. But the people that she's attracting to this, think about that, because we're going to talk about this in a moment. Who are her customers? Now, if you go to the next slide, please, this is my favorite picture. This is mysterious, elegant, and just remember, 95% of the consumers of bourbon are men. Men like hats, men like mysteriousness, men like black, frankly. She's got that black glass in her hand. Why is that so unusual? Well, it's part of her branding. And this is all high-end. Glencairn's an expensive glass. The black is elegant. You don't see that every day. Obviously, you can think in your head, oh, this was made just for this. I'm here to tell you, we use Glencairn glasses at the Whiskey Attic, and they're not inexpensive, and they're not as expensive as they look, which makes them the perfect thing to put in a package like this. And they're small, so you can use small samples of the bourbon in order to do it. But what does this picture say to you? If you look at this picture is just brilliant. So the marketing here, the branding here, and I can't stress this enough, the branding is second to none. Remember, this just came out in October. She put a deadline for December 4th, which means if you haven't already signed up, you can't sign up. And if you know anything about branding, you know anything about marketing, you put a red rope up in front of a club, people want to stand in line to get in. There could be nobody in the club. What she just did is artificially put a time frame that didn't exist. There's no reason this couldn't go on. Do you know when the first package arrives? In March. And for those of you who follow us at the M3 Center and at the University of South Florida in the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management, I will be sharing the packaging when it comes in, and I will do an unveiling video for you to follow this up so you can all talk about that. Yeah, it is mysterious, isn't it, Scott? Very intriguing. We like that. It draws us in. I just think this is brilliant. And yes, wine can be very similar, Ann. Let's go to the next slide, please. So people, there are three things Marcus Lemonis pitches in his show, The Profit. He says there are three things to any entrepreneurial venture: people, process, and product. I agree that those are important. I do not think they're the only three, but I think focusing on those three moving forward with this case study is important. So the product's pretty clear. We know what the product is. We've seen the product. But what is the product really? Is the product Marianne Eaves? Is the product the branding? Is the product the bourbon? Ladies and gentlemen, we don't even know what the bourbon is. We are literally, it could be something that could sell for $9 or much more. There is a famous bourbon that was the first high-end expensive bourbon, Pappy Van Winkle. For those of you who want to know how expensive this is, the most expensive Pappy Van Winkle, if you buy it wholesale or if you buy it retail, if you're one of the lucky few that get in on that, it's under $300 for the 20-year-old and the 23-year-old. Now, they're super exclusive, and so is this. But this is $550. Sight unseen, brand new branding, no history except for her. So how do we do the people here? All we're seeing is her. We don't know all the people behind her. Is she a party of one, or is this a whole group of people and she's just the front? And persons directly or tangentially involved in this business, I have other information beyond the scope of this that we'll cover in another section. But for this case study, just think about that. Who's involved here? You do need a time. Scott, that's an interesting question. So bourbon, for those of you who are not familiar with it, actually does not require aging. It requires brief storage or passing through wood. You could literally have it going down into a container with staves of wood in it, keep it there for 2 days, and it's bourbon. Straight bourbon needs to be 2 years aged, and there are other age statements like that. And if there's an age statement on the bourbon, every drop needs to be a minimum of that age. So that's a good question, but bourbon does not always have to be aged. That is not, certainly not for more than a day or two. Kate, I think that's an interesting question. What is the actual cost of this? But the cost isn't the interest here, right? The interest is the marketing, the branding here is just brilliant. So the team that got in this, are they in the background? But they're foundational. They are foundational. Michael, I think you have a good point. The product is the customer. Is the product the customer? Because if it is the customer, is it the customer because it makes them feel special? I think you have a very good point there. So if you see here, you have limited time, expertise, execution, support. There has to be a team here. This is too much for one person that is known as a master distiller to put together all by themselves. The extended relationships and relying on others in the industry, like the press. If you Google this name after this talk, which is, we've got another little bit here, you'll find she's got quite a few in Google that will come up. A lot of searches will come up with a lot of answers for her. The search history on her is pretty good. And you'll find a lot of press. She's very friendly with the press. They love her. And human resources here. It's responsible for holding the people together. This is a team. And you have to really be on the same page. Next slide, please. Thank you, Gian. So the bulk of the process and its dependence on branding is staggering here. So the idea is actually branding. The identity, although it looks like it's Marianne Eaves, what is it really? It's her, but it's branding. The product is branding. And Caitlin, very cool. It is fascinating. The market is a branded market. The people that want to have the best, that have the money to afford it. And when would you have that mean more than during COVID when people are out of work or money's even tighter? This makes your status go up even more if you can afford something like this. and branding leads the way and carries the brunt of the load for all of this marketing. Next slide, please. So let's have a little chat as we analyze this. One of the things that I'd like you to look at is the model for catering. I believe part of this model is almost like catering on steroids. Catering, as opposed to a restaurant, has someone pay for this facility and rent it. So the rental's taken care of. You have to put a down payment or you can lose it. So sometimes they make money without having to spend any. You already know what your costs are going to be on your food. You have it set. You already know what your labor is going to be. So you have a lot of set costs. What Eves has done here is a lot of the same things. That's why I say, is it kind of like a catering model? The difference is, in a catering needs brick and mortar. She does not. Eves does not require it. Is there some initial outlay of cash and capital to get the packaging and all? Of course. But this is not big capital. If you were to open a brick and mortar business in the food and beverage industry, which is what this is, for under $300,000, you've done an amazing job. That's just the metric. The risk assessment. What are you seeing here? Is there a risk? And I'm talking to now everybody online, the students. Is there a potential gain here? Could there be a loss? Is there a profit? Do you see a profit coming? Is there a loss? Any thoughts on that? RSBP event says this will be 100% great for bourbon crazies. And I think that was the idea here. And ND says the branding with the external agency could easily be upwards of 50K. I'd be shocked if it was that low, but I wouldn't be shocked if that was it. So I think that's a very good piece of information there. Do you think people will really be worth trying it? There is no store nor tasting. Right. So what are they buying into? The brand and the belief that this person has standing, and that if you associate yourself with this person, you too have status and standing, and you're getting something that is curated. There it is. Excellent. Beautiful. Well done, Scott. Let's go to the next slide. Can you put that last question up again? What are the ways for new entrepreneurs to raise capital during this difficult time? I think, Anadori, this is beyond the scope of this particular talk, but I'm going to answer it anyway. The beauty of this is you can do this without spending anywhere near the money that she spent on the advertising. She's done all the heavy lifting. If you go to the website after this talk, you'll see that it's the simplest, most elegant website you can imagine. So what are some lessons here? What went right? What went wrong? Well, ladies and gentlemen, nothing is perfect. I'm here to tell you I did it. I went through so I could actually tell you how it looked and how it operated. And the only two things that weren't perfect, and I mean perfect, was my email. The logo for Eves wasn't quite prominent enough. That's not a big deal. But this next part was, when I got from the business my receipt for purchasing this product, it said 000158 was my number, which means she had only sold 158, and I bought pretty close to the end. So why am I sharing this with you? Because at 158 of these, she's at under $90,000. $90,000 may sound like a lot of money, and I'm sure it's fine. I do not know what that accounts for. I don't know if it accounts for any of the ones that were at $300, because I bought the aficionado. So I look forward to reporting more on this as it goes forward, but I thought you'd get a kick out of that. And don't forget, she passed along. The goal was the 1,000, right, Greg? The goal was the 1,000 for the lesson. I don't know what her goal was, but were it me doing this, my goal would have been at least 1,000. If I get $500,000 off this venture, everybody gets paid. I put a little dough away. It's clean. Taxes are paid. It's a very clean deal. Having said that, nothing is perfect. And the plan was spot on, or did she potentially misjudge some key metrics? Bourbon, I'm here to tell you, I'm just going to give you an overview of it since I'm an expert in this area. Bourbon is not thought of as an expensive whiskey. The expensive whiskey is single malt Scotch. So if a single malt Scotch aged 18 years and up, if someone in that field came out with this exact idea and executed it exactly how she did and sold it for the same price she did, they may have sold 10,000 of them. Because the value proposition on this one is strictly on Eve's name. It's not on bourbon, because bourbon is not thought of as something you would spend that much money on. You go and have a bourbon, you're thinking it's going to be, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks a bottle. You buy a single malt Scotch that's 18, then you get bigger. Exactly right. And this is leave this question up for a moment, this comment, if you would. All it takes is a few lovers of it to curate the brand. That is absolutely correct. You sell it out. And people want a Travis Scott McDonald's toy because you couldn't get it. That's exactly right. You nailed it. So ship your product. The key to being an entrepreneur is get the product out there. She can't lose, because the worst thing that can happen is, she said, by popular demand, she puts it out again. What I saw on the website the other day is that anybody can call and suggest somebody, and what she's going to do is she's going to give 50 to industry people for free based on COVID and what's going on. So she's already, that's a discount, ladies and gentlemen, just so you know, that's what that is. She should have led with that. She didn't lead with that. That came after the numbers weren't hitting what she thought they would, or what have you. But the key to being an entrepreneur is to open the door. The key here is to close the sale and ship it. You can always do another run. You can always have another bite at the apple. That's the beautiful here. The beautiful part here. The potential downside is probably very, very small. No one's going to know the numbers unless she tells somebody. And data analytics can't do anything without data. So she could have done all kinds of data analytics. How big is the market for this? How many bottles actually get sold in this? Who am I going to market this to around? They clearly thought this part through. And during COVID, I think they thought, oh, this status would be even bigger. But the data analytics after the fact, I'm going to work with her and see if we can come up with something fun. I will be reaching out. It did not fail miserably no matter what, because I already know it sold at least 160. And at 90 grand, she's not going to get hurt. There's enough ways to pivot here that it's not going to be. Is the brand damaged or strengthened? I would argue you can't damage the brand unless she damages it. And you can't strengthen the brand except for with time. So what she just did, if she launches this and I get my package in March, I would argue the brand is strengthened. She shipped what she promised she'd ship. If they ship nothing, the press will turn around and then the brand will be damaged. The brand will get killed. But she won't do that. There's enough capital here. The next slide, please. So as you synthesize all of this, I want you to look at what we just did. We just walked through hospitality entrepreneurship with leadership and planning. We covered the law and explained the importance of HR. PR and marketing, leaning heavily on this is all branding, right? The technology, this is all through the internet. There is no other way there is no brick and mortar here. All of the images, all on the internet. And food and beverage, this is a beverage. At the end of the day, the actual physical product is bourbon. It's a physical product. And that's an interesting question on influencers. I would argue she is the influencer, and there are some influencers that she's going to go on. So you are not wrong there, and we may see that, and I'll report back and see if any of that transpired when we do an update later. All included in a real-time entrepreneurial venture. For those of you who have been to all 6 of these courses, you will notice leadership and planning, law and HR, PR and marketing, technology, and F&B were the first 5. And this synthesizes all of those through a really cool case study. And you've been very good thus far. Would you be kind enough to go to the next slide, please? So the power of the USF hospitality program. There's so much more to discuss and delve into, as you can see. But if you want to learn more of the material like this, just enroll at USF. Come to the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management in the Muma College of Business. This is what we do. We do this all day, every day. We'd love to have you part of it. More importantly, I'm thrilled you were part of this, and it's a pleasure. Again, on behalf of Professor Don Wood and myself, it has really been an exceptional pleasure. We like to finish right on time, and we've got 1 minute. If there's another question, I will take it. And I want to thank everybody for great participation. Thank you, Kevin. That's very kind. Anne, very kind of you. Very, very nice. Scott, welcome. Thank you. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, share this with your friends. Lean on us when you need to. We are always available to you. And honestly, well worth your time to check out the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management. We're here for you always. We appreciate you taking the time to watch this, and I look forward to doing the follow-up with you in the near future. Gian, thank you.
Thank you, Adam, so much. What a great lecture again. We appreciate your time. And I would like to also remind everybody that the quiz will be up tonight, right after the lecture in Schoology. So please log in there and do the quiz. You have until the end of this year to do them. Also, for those of you who may be joining us a little bit late, please feel free to go into Schoology, and you can also do all the quizzes a little bit later. Again, you have until the end of this year to complete all the quizzes. We would like to remind you that even though these lectures are open to public, which we are grateful for the interest that we have received. As a matter of fact, Adam's first lecture, you may remember, we have launched about 6 weeks ago, and that particular lecture has been viewed more than 10,000 times. So this shows the impact of these lectures. We are thrilled as the whole faculty of the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management to do this, to be able to help you. Regardless, you are in the certificate to earn the certificate or just here to benefit from the knowledge shared here, please feel free to reach out to us. And our email is at certificate@m3center.org. And next week will be our last week of this certificate program. Our Dean of the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management, Dr. Pat Morio, will be doing the last lecture with you. Also, we'll have Mr. David Dino, who is the president of Blooming Brands. If you know Carabas Bonefish Grill and many different restaurants, so you would be in a treat for that. We would like to wish you a wonderful evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you might be, what time that you may be watching this. We'll see you next week. Thank you.